The views and opinions heard on this show do not necessarily reflect the views of the host.
There had to be someone, not something, because things were out, second law of thermodynamics. There had to be someone without beginning or end who had the power and the knowledge, the wisdom, the incredible, infinite intelligence to put all this together, from the organization of the atom to the cosmos and so forth.
When we look at the many examples of God's power, it should invoke a sense of reverence and awe in our hearts.
Truly, our Creator is the God of wonders, and the greatest wonder is His immeasurable love.
Welcome to another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. I am your host, Lamont Gates, bringing you the world of faith, metaphysicality, and spirituality. Today, as we continue with our near-death experience series, I sit down with a near-death experiencer who went from having all the questions in the world to having the answers after his experience. Let's get it started. Ladies and gentlemen, joining me via telephone is near-death experiencer Tommy Laux. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
Now, we had a discussion on your near-death experience off record, which you say contained, I guess, prophecy, if you would, on our current situation?
Yes. The future that's happening right now.
Excellent, and we will get into that. But before we get into that and your near-death experience, let's walk backwards. Let's go down memory lane. Let's regress you, so to speak, back to your childhood. Tell us what you learned there about spirituality, heaven, hell, etc.
Well, I was born in a small town in Texas, and everybody was Catholic. That was the German, a lot of German. So Catholic was my religion. Just before I turned 12, we moved to California. And I still had to go to catechism and for a little bit until I was confirmed. And then it was pretty much, I was done with religion at that time.
Now, when you say you were done with religion, tell us exactly what you mean by being done with it.
Well, it means I still had faith in God and such, but like in my town in Texas, everybody was under one religion. So everybody was Catholic, or there was only one church. So getting to California, everybody on the block had a different religion, and they were all right by their own, recognition or whatever. And I'm only 12. So at that point, I just go, well, we can't all be right. We can't all be wrong. So I just let that go. I mean, I still had to go to church for like weddings and funerals and things like that.
Now, that's some serious philosophical thinking at age 12. I would believe that most 12-year-olds are still leaning towards their family's tradition. But you posed an important question asking, how can all be right yet having varying degrees of interpretation?
Right. And it wasn't I've always asked many questions, and that's generally what got me in trouble, because I would ask questions that most people can't answer or won't answer because there is no answer.
Right, and many times that true answer is actually a very hard pill to swallow up against their long-held belief systems. So, how old were you at the time of your near-death experience?
I was 50 years old. It was 2008. Ironically, it was July 20th, 2008, which happens to be the same day. In 69, when we moved to California, on that date is when the moon landing was. So I've always kind of been fascinated by that, but not paid much attention to it. But now it's so obvious how the numbers line up.
So it seems over time you've incorporated numerology into your experience?
Yes, but I still don't call it numerology. I just call it matching numbers, patterns. I really never paid much attention to, not consciously. I suppose subconsciously I've stored all these questions. And in that event of at 50 years old, so every question basically that I had at that point in time was answered.
Okay, so let's start with the day of the experience itself. How did it occur?
Okay, my wife and I we went to Colorado to my sister's house for a family reunion, my family. And we were on our way back, and we were on the first leg of the tour. We're about a half hour away from her best friend's house in Colorado, and we were on a motorcycle. Somebody made a left in front of us on the highway, and I still to this day can't remember the impact or even at first I couldn't remember the day, but a shirt that I had bought at a Harley dealer that was in my bag reminded me that we stopped there, and it was in between that and where we were headed that we crashed. So the memory of the incident is gone. It doesn't. But the memory of that adventure, that's all I went there with my wife. She died and did not come back. I knew this before I came out of the coma.
Okay, take us into the experience. Let us know what happened when you realized that you weren't on the bike anymore.
Okay, well, the first thing that I could mention is once I died, I could see myself. I could see the accident. I could see the dead body. And I don't know if it was immediately at that point or after I was given this upgraded memory and the life review. But my life review was not like, it wasn't like watching it on TV. It was like being there at every instant. So in other words, time doesn't exist. The replay was actually, I could see, I was there and I could see it was like every crossroad or everything that is in my memory. I could see the why and the obstacles on either path. It doesn't matter which way you go because the obstacles are everywhere. What matters is how you react to it and how you deal with it. I immediately was kind of shocked by that. And it's hard for me to break it down, and because I flatlined 3 times, it's hard to break it down into what happened at each stage of that, because it's all one event to me in human terms.
Most people state that during a life review, they see the good they've done in their lives and behavior that they may have needed to improve upon.
Absolutely. That you see everything that you've done. You're being judged by yourself, basically. In other words, yes, God is there. You feel that presence. You know that energy is there. But you also realize that all the way along the way, those miracles that kept you alive up to that point, they're not just miracles. They're your saving grace, basically. You know, everybody does stupid stuff or makes mistakes, and, you know, everybody, that's just part of life. But intent is everything.
You know, I'm so glad you mentioned that intention is everything, because it actually trumps the conservative religious attitude that says legalism is everything. In other words, what you do is what you're being judged by, rather than why you did it via the intention.
Yeah. And that's the human interpretation, or the human condition. And this is the biggest part of the message. There was 2 words, was ego and soul. And it was very clearly defined to me. Ego is the human condition. It's not, you know, you keep studying and looking at it. I didn't study any of this. I had no preconceived notions about death because I didn't think about it. I didn't lean one way or the other. I had, I figured the Gospels must have something, that we're still talking about them. So there must be something in there that's true. And it is. Everything that you hear throughout life is part of your character. And that's very important to understand that your inner child, it's always with you. You may grow older and grow up, but you're always in that, you're always referring back to your first 7 years. After that, you're kind of conditioned to either you learn how to cheat or you learn how to play.
So you said two words appeared, ego and soul. Were these words literally communicated to you?
Yes. All of this was basically without words. It was the figures there are not as such as here. In other words, I felt the same as I do here, but I was much lighter. I was free of any. There was no pain. Where was we at? The soul and the ego. So what that was is to realize that every living human has those two conditions, those two entities within them. Even if you don't believe in it, doesn't matter. You have your spirit and your human condition.
So would you say the ego is a term for the human condition, as the soul would represent your unlimited spiritual nature?
Yes, unlimited. There's nothing impossible with the soul, with the spirit. Everything is, and this is kind of part of what is unfolding right now. In other words, you know how fast technology is moving. Things, as soon as you buy them, they're obsolete because they got something newer and better and faster and whatnot. That's all part of the lesson that we're learning. In other words, a lot of people are into, and I don't hold this against them, it's just part of, whatever entertains you, but like gory movies or gory books of crimes and stuff like that, and that doesn't mean you're a criminal, but it does, it intrigues you because it's got a mystery or whatever. And you're the detective or you're the criminal. You're playing all the parts, basically. And I really never understood that much until I really started reading. And I did not read a lot before this happened, but now I can't read enough.
Yeah, so the ego may explain why sex and violence sells so much in the media.
Yes, because that's playing on your emotion. In other words, what you feared when you're young, you want to dominate when you're old. So if you were abused as a child, by the way, I was not abused as a child. I was beyond the self-abuse, of course.
And I think we've all been abused in one way, shape, or another on planet Earth here. But why don't you take us through what occurred next? Did you see any entities like deceased relatives? You also mentioned God. Did you feel God was there?
Absolutely. The term God is kind of elusive. In other words, it's not a he or a she. It is, to me, it's love. So that would be an emotion. But that love, a lot of people have never experienced it or never acknowledged it. You know what I'm saying?
Impossible to feel on Earth, many say.
Yeah, that level. Yes, it's impossible. But that's what we're all looking for. we get it confused with other things like power, money, control. The collusion involved in obtaining that power and maintaining that power. It's everywhere. Blackmail. The higher you get in the power structure here, the more people got their sights on you.
So it's like ancient Rome all over again.
Exactly, and that is a fact. That's where we're at.
Did you see any familiar faces during your experience, or an unearthly landscape of some sort?
Yeah, it's hard to explain. I could see it was everywhere at once. The accident was Colorado, but I could see my kids in California, my mom back at the hotel in California or Colorado. I believe they were on their way back to Texas. I could just see everybody that, as they heard the news, everybody that was in contact with this, I could see their reactions. That was one of the things that brought me back, or encouraged me to come back, because I did have a choice.
Okay, prior to coming back, you say you saw glimpses of the future. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, well, this is what I was told or asked to come back and write a book. I've never written a book before. I write a lot of songs and stuff and poetry, but those are two completely different approaches at writing. But I agreed, okay, from that side it looks easy. So as far as the future, I don't like to make predictions, because you know what I mean? It's not like I'm writing this for the fame or the recognition. And let me add, before I go into the what I wrote in the book, the main thing that I came back for was my children, my son and my daughter. And my daughter is doing fine, but my son died of heroin in 2016.
So indeed, you suffered a loss, I see. But going back, though, to your experience, prior to coming back into your body, what were some of these future events that you saw that are now our present time, as we discussed at the top of the show?
Yes, it was, that's basically what God, or the spirit that I was with, told me to come back and really pay attention to these conflicts, not just the outer conflicts, but the conflicts within myself, as to, all right, why is this better than that? And why is this person better than that person? Trust nobody, but ask questions of everybody. So anyway, in my book, I'm talking about what's wrong with the world. Okay, we've got economists that want nothing but for everybody to spend money. And there's no limit. There will never, ever be a limit, because everybody should spend everything. But save. So there's conflicts every day. The more you make, the more power you've got. So anyway, it breaks down to the system that we're under, and I call it the ego system. Not the economy or the ecology, but we fix the ego system, get over ourselves, and everything will fix itself. It was clearly shown to me, but the amount of information that the amount of information I got, it would take me thousands of years to write it all down, to explain it. First, I had to understand what I'm sitting back here to look at, and let it unfold, because I don't like to predict, because my predictions are almost like suggestions. I'm not here to point out the flaws. I'm here to, yes, I will point out the flaws in the system. I just won't point out the individuals that are creating the false narratives.
So what was it like attempting to tell people what you saw after you returned to your body?
Well, it was very difficult. Even after I wrote the book, some people loved it, some people hated it. And I can honestly tell you, those who hated it, and openly hated it, or, because of some of the language, it was their superficial ego that they couldn't handle that word, because the ego does not like that word. Soul is cool with it because the soulful person doesn't have that amount of judge. That's the interesting part about the ego, is it will hide from itself. It will not admit its own position or existence. That's part of the genetic lineage. In other words, I am my dad and my mom, but I'm also my son and my daughter.
Share with us the name of this book and where we can find it.
Egonomics 101. The awakening has begun within or without you. It's in the process right now of being published. It should be out in a couple of months. I suppose, they tell me it's going to be on Amazon and all of the big bookstores. But, I really don't have a lot of faith in people and contracts.
So is there anything you'd like to tell us about death, dying, the afterlife, spirituality, fear, etc.? Since I know you don't trust many people, but I'm sure people can trust you.
Yeah, have no fear, because fear is just a tool of the ego. Fear, any negative emotion is a negative existence, and every positive emotion, such as love, joy, you're being led by your spirit. If you're fearful and just following all of those, you're being led by the ego, by the human anti-God, whatever.
Tommy, I thank you for being with us here on Real Spiritual Talk Radio, and may you continue to spread your spiritual enlightenment to others.
I appreciate being here. I know that I'm blessed to be alive, and I want to share those blessings.
Thank you. And that concludes another edition of Real Spiritual Talk Radio. As we continue with our series of near-death experience accounts, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I am your host, Lamont Gates, hoping that you are all being much more spiritually enlightened. Continue to join us here for more accounts and even more to come. So with that said, Real Spiritual Talk Radio is now signing off.